Did you ever wonder where the tradition of giving oranges at Christmas comes from? Well, there are a few different versions, but one of the stories I seem to remember talks about how an orange represents the Christmas season of giving and sharing. This is because oranges can be split into segments and shared with others. So while I can't actually share a real orange with everybody, I can at least share this watercolour painting of an orange. Actually, these are clementines, so shh, just keep that to yourself, will you? The advantages of still life as a way of painting in watercolour are huge. However, what most artists love about still life paintings is the amount of control they have. Your subject can be arranged, lit and set up in any way you like. You can move things around, change backgrounds and find precisely the angle you want for a composition. You can work directly from life or take a photo. And painting from photos adds a new level of benefits. You can take multiple photos from different angles and get numerous compositions from a single subject. A snapshot also suspends your subject in time. This means you can take all the time you want to paint your still life because fruits and flowers won't wilt and you don't have to worry about your objects getting moved by accident. I think still life is excellent for beginners. For a start, they can be painted comfortably from your home. Painting is difficult enough without a battle against changing lighting conditions or outdoor elements. And more experienced artists get the same benefits. Plus, they're a great backup subject, especially if the rain prevents you from getting out to paint. Another non-negligible advantage is that you don't have to render your subjects accurately to get good results. If the proportions of your apples or that bottle aren't quite right, nobody's going to notice. So here's a summary of the advantages of still life painting. You get a high level of control over the subject, you can paint anytime, either from photo or real life, there's no hurry, you can paint from the comfort of your home, it's suitable for beginners and seasoned painters alike, and it doesn't have to be accurate. So what should you paint? Finding inspiration can be tricky at the best of times. So begin by looking around you. For example, I know a lot of artists who begin their sketchbooks by painting their artist supplies. Here are a few ideas on how to find inspiration for your still life paintings. You could start by looking in the kitchen. This is an excellent source of interesting objects which anyone can relate to. Utensils, bowls and cutlery all make great subjects. Raid a junk shop or a thrift store. Aged and stressed objects generally have interesting forms and nice textures. Find some old tools. Ancient hammers and used brushes have a lot of history and character. Keep an eye out for attractive packaging or interesting looking jars at the grocery store. Candies and cakes are great as well. Pick things up while you're outdoors, like leaves, twigs, bark or rocks. Natural forms and textures make good still life objects. And don't forget, flowers and plants are classic subjects to paint. Over time you can build up a collection of objects for still life paintings. This could provide you with endless compositions and painting ideas. Just a couple of quick tips when you set up your still lifes. Don't use too many objects. Still life paintings can quickly get confusing. Also try to select things that relate to each other somehow. This way your artwork will tell a more straightforward story. Okay, now I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process I used to paint this watercolour still life from beginning to end. If you want to follow along with this project, you can download the sketch template and my reference photo by following the link below this video. Begin by tracing the outline onto a sheet of watercolour paper. Next, fix the sheet onto a board using masking tape all around the edges. The masking tape defines the framing and cropping of the paintings, so if you want the same composition, be careful to line up the masking tape the way I have in the sketch template. The first thing I did was identify the brightest parts of the oranges and the orange segments and apply masking fluid to reserve the white paper. I'm using a bamboo dip pen to apply the fluid. Leave the masking fluid to dry completely, then dampen the background with clear water, being careful to paint around the shapes of the oranges. I'm doing this so I can apply a wet on wet wash for the grey background colour. I chose to mix a cool grey colour using burnt sienna and French ultramarine. I wanted the background to have a slightly blue tinge to set up a complementary colour scheme with the oranges. Orange and blue create a colour harmony which is said to be complementary. While this wash is still wet, you can charge in some stronger paint into the areas of cast shadow. And to add some texture to the background, I used a spray bottle to splatter a few drops of clean water into the damp wash. Let the background dry before painting the oranges, first with a diluted mix of warm yellow, then go back into the wash with a stronger mixture. The aim here is to begin establishing the tonal range, with light values around the highlights and stronger values toward the shaded area. While the orange is still damp, continue to build up the value of the shaded side of the orange with darker shades of orange paint. Use the reference photo as a guide to try and discern the bigger shapes of darker values. Add some orange paint below the orange to represent the reflected light bouncing off the orange onto the surface underneath. Then leave this paint to dry before moving on to the next stage. Apply the same approach to the second orange, being careful to paint around the leaf and the stalk, and building up the tonal values to represent the spherical form. Begin with diluted yellow, then a stronger yellow mix, then orange, then darker orange, using a wet on wet technique so that the colours fuse together. Be careful if you leave an edge not blended. The brush stroke should be quite wet so that you have time to come back and continue to pull out the coloured wash before the paint dries. Otherwise you'll end up with a hard edge where the paint begins to settle into the paper. Now you can add a first wash of colour to the orange segments. I also painted a glow of orange colour underneath these shapes. I used a lifting technique to create vertical lines of lighter colour to simulate the textured veins on the segments. Next I added a wash of light green to the leaves and the stalk. I'll come back to this part later to add more detail using a glazing technique. Now that the paint has dried, you will probably notice that the colours are lighter and less vibrant. This is normal with watercolour paints. The colours always look stronger while the paint is wet. So to increase the colour intensity, I repeat the process again with a second layer of colours. Each orange is painted from light to dark, paying attention to build up the values to create an illusion of depth in 3 dimensions. To avoid a harsh edge around the highlight, I start by wetting the area with clear water. Then I add brushstrokes around the highlights which blend smoothly, then continue to increase the strength and colour value as I progress. I also added a new glaze of colour to the orange segments, but this time painting details to represent the textured pattern on their surface. Leave this layer of paint to dry completely, then you can remove the masking fluid using a kneaded eraser or a rubber cement pickup tool. In an attempt to improve the mottled texture of the orange peel, I used a natural sponge dipped into paint and dabbed onto the surface. You only need to do this in a few places to subtly improve the textured effect. The final stage of this painting is to add some stronger shadows. Begin by adding some shadow details around the stalk, then add some stronger form shadows to the oranges themselves. If you like, you can use a dry sponge to mop up some of the paint and create a mottled edge to the shadow shape. I added a few darker details to the bottom of the segments near the shadow. Then I started adding stronger cast shadows underneath the oranges themselves. I used French ultramarine neutralised with a small amount of burnt sienna. I wanted the shadows to have a blue hue to continue the complementary colour scheme. Don't forget to add some cast shadows to the oranges themselves, created by the stalk and the leaves, and also in the extreme corners where the 2 oranges meet. Then add the cast shadows under the segments as well. The final step is to add some details to the leaf using a darker toned green mixture. Leave gaps to let the underlying colour show through and to represent the veined texture on the leaves. And here's the finished painting. If you'd like to try this project for yourself, you can find a worksheet on my website. Check out the links below this video. If you give this project a try for yourself, then let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button to be alerted whenever I publish something new. Also, if you'd like to receive some free watercolour lessons that I only share with my newsletter subscribers, follow the link underneath this video to sign up.